Somewhere inside that fire, something was still alive, and it was calling his name. The night outside the logistics facility in Fort Ridge, Virginia, was unusually still until the alarm broke it apart, sharp and mechanical, cutting through the darkness like a warning no one could ignore. Staff Sergeant Caleb Morgan was already halfway across the motor pool when he heard it, the kind of sound that made trained men stop without thinking, because alarms like that were never routine. The air smelled faintly of smoke drifting on the wind. Even before the building itself came into view, a low industrial structure now glowing with an unnatural orange pulse against the night sky. Caleb froze for only a second, his eyes narrowing as distant voices shouted orders and boots hit pavement in a chaotic rhythm that meant something had already gone wrong. Then he heard it again, faint but unmistakable, a bark cut short by distance and heat, and everything in him shifted. "That's inside," someone said behind him. But Caleb was already moving before the sentence finished, his gear half secured, his instincts taking over in a way that didn't wait for permission or protocol. Captain Derek Holloway stepped into his path near the gate, his voice firm but controlled, telling him to stand down, that entry was restricted until the fire unit stabilized the structure, but Caleb didn't even slow down. "There's still something in there," he said simply, not as a question, not as a debate, just as a fact he could not unhear. The fire trucks arrived in the distance, lights washing over the scene in red and white pulses, but the building itself groaned as if it had already accepted its fate, metal contracting, glass cracking somewhere deep inside. Caleb's gaze locked onto the entrance where heat shimmered like a wall, and for a brief moment everything around him narrowed into that single point. Then he saw it, a shadow at the edge of the smoke, low to the ground, barely visible, moving once before disappearing again. "K9 unit," someone called out, but the word barely reached him before he was already at the door, pulling a thermal hood over his face, ignoring the shouted orders behind him. Inside, the world changed instantly, sound collapsing into a dull roar, light dissolving into shifting orange and black. Every step forward met with heat that pressed against him like a physical force. The structure was not fully collapsed yet, but it was unstable, beams above creaking under weight and temperature, warning signs written in every flicker of falling ash. Caleb moved carefully but without hesitation, scanning through the haze, calling out once, his voice swallowed almost immediately by the environment. Then he heard it again, closer this time, a weak but steady bark that carried through the smoke like a thread he could follow. "Hold on," he said under his breath, not knowing if anyone could hear him, but speaking anyway as he advanced deeper into the structure. The floor beneath him was uneven, debris scattered like a map of what had once been order, and every instinct told him to turn back, but something stronger kept him moving forward. And then he saw him, a German shepherd, motionless for a moment near a collapsed storage rack, his coat dusted with ash, his body tense but struggling, eyes still tracking movement even through exhaustion. Caleb dropped to one knee immediately, extending a hand slowly, not forcing, not rushing, just offering presence in a place that had none left. The dog didn't retreat, but didn't fully move forward either, caught between instinct and trust, as if deciding whether the world still held anything safe. "Hey, buddy," Caleb said softly, his voice steady despite the chaos around them, the kind of tone used in moments where words mattered more than volume. The dog shifted slightly, one paw dragging against the floor, refusing to give in completely to the weight of the moment. Caleb reached closer, carefully assessing the situation, noting the way the animal stayed focused on him despite everything collapsing around them, as if recognition mattered more than fear. Behind them, the structure groaned again, louder this time, a deep warning sound that rolled through the walls and into the floor beneath them, signaling that time had narrowed to something fragile and urgent. Caleb glanced toward the exit, then back at the dog, making a decision that didn't need language, only certainty. "I've got you," he said quietly, and in that moment, the dog took a single step forward. Caleb moved deeper into the smoke-filled structure, each step measured but urgent, the air growing heavier, as if the building itself was resisting every breath he took. The German shepherd stayed close now, no longer frozen in place, but moving with a careful rhythm beside him, its paws sliding slightly on the debris-covered floor, guided less by certainty and more by trust. Caleb kept one hand extended just enough to remain a steady presence, not touching unless needed, speaking softly under his breath as though sound itself could anchor them both in a place where visibility no longer existed. Around them, the world had collapsed into shifting shapes, flickers of orange light pulsing through thick gray haze, and the distant groan of stressed metal created a constant reminder that time inside this space was limited. Somewhere above, a beam shifted, sending a brief shower of ash down through the broken ceiling, and Caleb instinctively lowered his stance, shielding the dog without thinking, his body reacting before his mind had fully processed the danger. "Stay with me," he said quietly, his voice steady despite the pressure around them, and the dog responded with a low sound that was not quite a bark, but not silence either, as if acknowledging the command in a way that transcended training. They moved past overturned crates marked with faded military stencils, their edges warped from heat, and Caleb briefly scanned them without stopping, focused entirely on the faint movement he believed he had seen earlier. Then it came again, a sound more distinct now, a rhythmic, weak call from somewhere ahead and slightly to the left, drawing them toward a corridor partially blocked by collapsed shelving. Caleb slowed, adjusting his footing, placing one hand briefly against the wall to steady himself as heat radiated through the structure like a living force. The German shepherd paused too, ears twitching, body tense, as if recognizing something buried beneath the chaos. Caleb looked down at the animal and nodded once, not as an order, but as confirmation that they were hearing the same thing. "We are close," he said, almost to himself, and continued forward, stepping over a fractured beam that had fallen diagonally across the passage. The corridor beyond was narrower, forcing them closer together, and Caleb could feel the intensity of the environment increasing with every foot of progress, the air thick enough to make each breath feel weighted. Yet the dog did not fall back, even when the path became more difficult, instead pressing forward with a quiet determination that mirrored his own. In the distance, the sound grew clearer, revealing not just presence, but struggle, a life still holding on in the center of collapse. Caleb's pace slowed again as he approached what remained of a storage room, its doorway partially caved in, light flickering from within like a failing signal. He crouched slightly, peering through the opening, and what he saw confirmed everything his instincts had been telling him since the moment he entered. Inside, partially shielded by fallen structure, another German shepherd lay trapped beneath a section of twisted framework, its breathing shallow but steady, eyes tracking his movement with alert recognition. Caleb immediately assessed the situation, scanning for the safest approach, knowing that any sudden movement could destabilize what remained of the room. The dog beside him shifted closer, a soft sound escaping it, as if responding to the presence of its counterpart, a connection unspoken but immediately understood. Caleb placed a hand gently against the nearest stable surface, testing its strength, then carefully began to move forward, each motion deliberate and controlled. "I see you," he said quietly toward the trapped animal, maintaining calm, projecting reassurance through tone rather than force. The space around them seemed to narrow further as the structure continued its slow decline, but Caleb's focus did not break, his attention fixed on creating enough stability to reach the dog without triggering further collapse. Behind him, the first German shepherd remained close, watching, waiting, as if understanding that what came next required trust beyond instinct. And in that fragile balance between fire, silence, and determination, Caleb reached out once more, preparing to bridge the final distance between survival and uncertainty. The space inside the damaged storage room felt narrower with every passing second, as if the walls themselves were tightening around the last remaining pockets of breathable air. Caleb Morgan carefully shifted his weight forward, one hand still braced against a stable beam, testing each movement before committing, while the German shepherd beside him stayed unusually still, watching the trapped dog with an intensity that felt almost human. The faint light from outside flickered through broken panels overhead, creating unstable patterns across the debris, and for a brief moment everything seemed suspended between collapse and survival. Caleb adjusted his stance, lowering himself slightly to reduce pressure on the weakened floor, and extended his arm further into the room, moving slowly enough that even his own breath felt like a risk. The trapped German Shepherd responded with a weak lift of its head, its eyes locking onto him with a clarity that cut through the smoke, and it made a small effort to shift its front paws, though the weight above it limited any real movement. "You are not alone," Caleb said softly, his voice steady, controlled, almost grounding in contrast to the instability surrounding them, and the dog outside the room let out a low sound as if echoing the sentiment. The structure groaned again, a deep rolling sound that traveled through the floor and up into the walls, causing small fragments of dust and ash to fall like drifting snow. Caleb paused instantly, holding still, waiting for the movement to settle, his training taking over in a way that turned urgency into precision. Once the room stabilized enough, he carefully reached for a loose section of debris, testing its resistance with slow, controlled pressure, making sure nothing would shift unpredictably. The trapped dog shifted again, this time more determined, as if sensing the effort being made for its sake, and its breathing grew slightly steadier despite the harsh conditions. Caleb glanced back. For only a second, checking the position of the first German Shepherd, which had moved closer to the entrance of the room, but remained outside the unstable zone, watching with unwavering focus. There was something in that moment that felt deeper than instinct, as if both animals understood the importance of stillness, of waiting for the right moment to act. Caleb returned his attention forward and carefully cleared a small section of broken framing, creating just enough space to reach further in without disturbing the larger structure. His movements were deliberate, every action measured in inches rather than feet, because in this environment, even the smallest error could change everything. The trapped dog responded by shifting its weight again, and Caleb noticed it was trying to move toward him despite the restriction, a sign that awareness was still strong. "Almost there," he said quietly, not as reassurance alone, but as focus, as a reminder to himself as much as to the animal in front of him. Behind him, the second German Shepherd made a subtle movement, stepping just inside the threshold of the room, then stopping immediately as Caleb raised a hand slightly, signaling it to remain still. The bond between them seemed to tighten in that instant, not through command, but through understanding built in shared urgency. Caleb reached deeper into the space, finally making contact with a stable harness strap attached to the trapped dog's gear, and he paused for a fraction of a second to confirm its position. The dog did not resist, instead leaning slightly into the contact, as if recognizing the intent behind the touch. Outside, faint emergency lights pulsed through the haze, but they felt distant, almost unreal compared to the immediate world of heat, dust, and fragile structure inside. Caleb adjusted his grip carefully, preparing for a slow extraction that would require coordination, patience, and absolute control of movement. In that suspended moment, all sounds seemed to narrow down to breathing, shifting wood, and the quiet presence of three lives aligned in the same fragile objective: to move forward without breaking what was already barely holding together. Caleb Morgan maintained his grip on the harness strap, feeling the weight of the trapped German Shepherd shift slightly as he stabilized his position, every movement calculated to avoid disturbing the fragile balance of the broken structure around them. The air was still thick with smoke, but it had thinned just enough for shapes to become more defined, allowing him to see the outline of the dog more clearly as it responded to his presence with a steady, determined focus. Behind him, the second German Shepherd remained near the entrance, alert but restrained, its posture tense yet controlled, as if it understood that rushing forward could cause more harm than good. Caleb adjusted his footing carefully, sliding one boot back by a few inches to gain leverage, then slowly began to ease the trapped dog toward him, inch by inch, without forcing sudden movement. The dog responded with quiet compliance, shifting its weight as much as the confined space allowed, its eyes never leaving Caleb's face, maintaining a connection that felt steady despite the chaos around them. Caleb spoke softly again, not to command but to reassure, his voice calm and even, creating a rhythm that matched the slow, deliberate extraction process. "Stay with me, just a little longer," he said, as his hand tightened gently around the harness, ensuring a controlled pull that would not disturb the unstable beams above. The structure groaned faintly once more, a deep settling sound that caused Caleb to pause instantly, freezing every muscle in his body while he assessed the environment for any further movement. Dust drifted down through cracks in the ceiling, catching the faint light in slow motion, and for a brief moment everything felt suspended in fragile balance. Once the sound faded, Caleb resumed, guiding the dog forward another few inches, careful not to shift the surrounding debris more than necessary. The trapped German Shepherd managed a slight movement forward, a sign of trust and cooperation that made the process more precise but also more urgent. Behind them, the second dog stepped one pace closer again, then stopped, watching closely, its ears forward and alert, responding to every subtle change in motion. Caleb briefly turned his head, acknowledging its presence without breaking focus, then returned fully to the task at hand. The harness strap held firm as he carefully repositioned his grip, preparing for a gradual extraction that required both strength and absolute control of timing. The trapped dog shifted again, this time more noticeably, and Caleb immediately adjusted to support the movement, ensuring no sudden strain was placed on either the animal or the weakened environment. Every second inside that room felt extended, measured not in time, but in precision, as if the entire world outside had narrowed down to the space between one breath and the next. Caleb could feel the intensity building, not in panic, but in concentration, as he guided the dog through another small advancement toward safety. The second German Shepherd lowered its head slightly, as if sensing progress, then held still again, maintaining its position at the threshold like a silent guardian. Caleb's grip remained steady, his movements smooth and deliberate. As the trapped dog came closer to the edge of the debris field, its body now partially clear of the obstruction that had held it in place. He paused again, checking stability before continuing, ensuring that each motion remained within safe limits, knowing that patience was the only thing keeping the moment intact. And in that narrow, smoke-filled space between collapse and escape, the fragile progress continued, guided not by force, but by trust built in silence and steady hands. Caleb Morgan maintained his steady grip on the harness strap as the trapped German Shepherd moved another careful increment forward, its body now partially freed from the twisted framework that had confined it moments earlier. The air around them felt slightly less dense than before, though the heat and smoke still lingered in heavy waves that made each breath deliberate and controlled. Caleb adjusted his stance again, shifting his weight backward by a few inches to create a safer angle of pull, ensuring that the dog's movement remained smooth and without sudden strain. The second German Shepherd remained near the threshold, its posture alert but restrained, eyes fixed on the progress inside the room, as if tracking every subtle change in motion. Caleb's focus remained absolute, his attention divided only between the harness in his hand and the structural stability above them, which continued to emit occasional low groans as the building settled under stress. He carefully guided the trapped dog forward again, another small but critical advancement, bringing its shoulders closer to the edge of the collapsed debris. The dog responded with steady trust, no longer resisting, but cooperating in a way that reflected awareness of the situation, as if understanding that patience was the only path forward. Caleb paused briefly, checking the overhead beams, ensuring that no shifting had occurred during the movement, and then resumed with even greater caution. "Almost there, stay calm," he said softly, his voice steady and grounding, cutting through the tension that filled the confined space. The dog outside the room lowered its head slightly, remaining still, as though mirroring the controlled patience required for the moment. Caleb adjusted his grip once more, sliding one hand further along the harness for better leverage, then slowly drew the trapped dog forward another few inches. The motion was controlled, precise, and continuous, each step measured to avoid disturbing the fragile environment. Dust drifted slowly through the broken ceiling, illuminated by faint, unstable light, creating the impression of suspended time. The trapped German Shepherd was now significantly closer to full extraction, its front half clear of the obstruction, breathing steady but focused, maintaining eye contact with Caleb as if drawing strength from his presence. Behind them, the second dog took a cautious half step into the room, then stopped again, responding instantly to Caleb's subtle hand signal to hold position. The connection between all three felt unspoken yet coordinated, built entirely on timing, trust, and shared awareness of risk. Caleb leaned slightly backward, creating a final controlled angle for the next pull, preparing for the most critical part of the extraction. The harness tightened gently in his grip, and he adjusted immediately to distribute pressure evenly, ensuring the dog's movement remained stable and supported. The trapped German Shepherd shifted forward again, this time more decisively, clearing nearly all remaining obstruction, its paws finding firmer ground near Caleb's position. He steadied it immediately, one hand still on the harness, the other briefly extended to guide balance, maintaining calm control through every second of transition. The second dog remained fixed at the threshold, watching closely, its body still but alert, as if recognizing that the most important moment was approaching completion. Caleb exhaled slowly, maintaining composure as he prepared to complete the final movement out of the unstable zone, fully aware that every detail now mattered more than ever. And in that narrowing space of smoke, light, and fragile structure, the extraction reached its final stage, held together by patience, precision, and unwavering focus. Caleb Morgan maintained full control of the situation as the trapped German Shepherd finally cleared the last section of collapsed debris, its front paws now fully free and its body transitioning from confinement to unstable ground inside the damaged structure. He immediately adjusted his stance, lowering his center of gravity to stabilize both himself and the animal, ensuring that the final movement out of the hazardous area would remain controlled and safe. The air remained heavy but slightly more breathable than before, as if the structure's intensity had shifted now that the most critical obstruction was being resolved. The second German Shepherd remained at the threshold, alert and focused, its position unchanged but its attention sharpened, tracking every motion with unwavering concentration. Caleb carefully guided the freed dog forward, supporting its weight through the harness as it stepped fully away from the collapsed framework, now standing within arm's reach of safety. The movement was slow, deliberate, and precise, with Caleb ensuring each step was stable before allowing the next. Once the dog was fully clear, he immediately placed a steadying hand along its side, confirming balance and orientation, while keeping his body positioned between the animal and the unstable interior. The rescued dog stood still for a moment, breathing measured but calm, its eyes shifting between Caleb and the opening behind them, as if registering the transition from danger to relative safety. Caleb gave a brief glance back into the structure, assessing conditions one final time, confirming that no additional movement had destabilized the surrounding beams. The environment still carried tension, but the immediate risk had decreased enough to allow careful withdrawal. He signaled subtly with his hand toward the second German Shepherd, indicating it should remain outside while he finalized extraction protocol. The second dog held position but leaned slightly forward, its posture tense, reflecting awareness that something significant had just changed. Caleb turned his attention back to the rescued animal and adjusted the harness gently, preparing to guide it toward the exit path. "You are doing good," he said softly, maintaining a calm tone designed to keep the animal grounded and focused. The rescued German Shepherd responded with a small, steady shift of weight, following his guidance without resistance. Caleb began a slow backward movement, leading the dog step by step toward the exit, ensuring that each footfall was secure on the unstable floor. Dust particles continued to drift through the air, illuminated by faint external light that now felt slightly more stable than before. The structure still emitted occasional low creaks, but no immediate collapse followed, allowing the controlled retreat to continue. The second dog moved one careful step closer to the doorway but stopped again, maintaining discipline in response to Caleb's presence and signals. As Caleb reached the threshold, he paused briefly to ensure both animals were stable, placing a steady hand on the rescued dog's shoulder for reassurance. The transition from interior to exterior space was gradual, marked by a subtle shift in air quality, temperature, and light intensity as they approached the opening. Caleb guided the rescued German Shepherd fully out of the structure, where it stood just beyond the doorway, now safely clear of the most dangerous zone. He remained close, maintaining contact for stability, while the second dog watched from just inside the threshold, still attentive and calm. The moment held a quiet stillness, as if the environment itself recognized the completion of a critical turning point. Caleb exhaled slowly, maintaining focus, ensuring that both animals were secure before considering the next step in evacuation. And in that fragile boundary between collapse and safety, the mission shifted from extraction to survival, held together by trust, precision, and steady human presence. Caleb Morgan remained steady just outside the damaged structure, keeping his position between the rescued German Shepherd and the unstable environment, his focus never drifting from the conditions that still carried risk despite the successful extraction. The air outside felt clearer, cooler, and more open, but the tension had not fully disappeared, as faint structural sounds still echoed from within the collapsed building. The second German Shepherd slowly stepped out from the threshold, moving with controlled caution until it joined the first dog in the safer open area, both animals now standing within a few feet of Caleb. He lowered his posture slightly, maintaining calm presence, scanning both dogs to ensure they were stable, responsive, and no longer in immediate distress. The rescued dog remained close to him, its breathing steadying as it adjusted to the shift in environment, while the second dog turned its head briefly toward the entrance as if acknowledging what had just been endured. Caleb placed a slow, reassuring hand along the shoulder of the first dog, confirming physical stability and reinforcing a sense of safety through controlled contact. Behind them, the structure emitted another low groan, but no further collapse followed, only the settling of damaged material under its own weight. Caleb immediately shifted his attention back to the animals, prioritizing their condition over the unstable building, which now appeared to be entering a quieter phase of failure rather than active danger. A faint set of emergency lights flickered in the distance, growing brighter as responders approached the perimeter, their presence signaling that professional containment was now arriving. Caleb raised one hand slightly toward the approaching lights, acknowledging backup, while keeping his primary focus on the two German Shepherds beside him. The rescued dog took a small step closer to him, pressing slightly against his leg, a gesture that reflected trust and stabilization after sustained stress. Caleb responded by lowering his hand gently along its back, ensuring steady contact without restricting movement. The second dog moved closer as well, positioning itself just behind the first, forming a quiet, unified presence around him. For a moment, all movement slowed, as if the environment itself had shifted from urgency to recovery. Caleb looked between both animals, confirming that neither showed signs of disorientation or further distress, then exhaled slowly, allowing the tension of the extraction phase to release. The approaching responders could now be seen more clearly through the haze, their movement controlled and coordinated as they secured the perimeter of the damaged structure. Caleb gave a brief signal indicating that the immediate extraction was complete and that both animals were stable and under supervision. The German Shepherds remained calm, standing close together, their attention gradually shifting away from the building and toward Caleb's presence as a stabilizing point. In that moment, the focus was no longer on survival within the structure, but on the transition from chaos to safety, marked by quiet stillness, controlled breathing, and the steady presence of trust that had carried them through every critical step of the operation. Caleb Morgan stood with both German Shepherds now fully outside the damaged structure, maintaining a calm and steady presence as the scene transitioned from active rescue to controlled response. The emergency team had arrived in full coordination, setting up a secure perimeter around the area while monitoring the unstable building for any additional risk of collapse. Caleb kept his focus on the animals, ensuring they remained grounded and stable after the intense sequence of extraction, his posture relaxed but still attentive to every subtle movement. The rescued German Shepherd remained close to his left side, occasionally leaning in as if confirming that the danger had truly passed, while the second dog stayed slightly behind, maintaining a protective stance that reflected awareness and caution. Caleb slowly adjusted his position to remain centered between both animals, offering a consistent point of reassurance as the environment around them shifted into recovery mode. The air outside was noticeably clearer, carrying only faint traces of smoke drifting away on the wind, and the chaotic sounds from inside the structure had now been replaced by controlled communication between emergency personnel. Caleb glanced briefly toward the building, confirming that no further movement was occurring, then returned his attention to the dogs, ensuring their physical and emotional state remained stable. A medic approached at a measured pace, carrying a compact kit, and Caleb signaled calmly that both animals were conscious and responsive. The medic stopped at a respectful distance, observing before proceeding, while Caleb continued to provide steady verbal reassurance to the dogs in a calm and even tone. The rescued German shepherd shifted slightly, sitting down for a moment as its breathing normalized, while the second dog lowered its head briefly before also settling into a more relaxed stance. The atmosphere around them gradually transformed from urgency into controlled recovery, with responders communicating in low, steady voices as they assessed the damaged structure behind the perimeter. Caleb maintained gentle contact with the first dog, resting a hand lightly along its shoulder to reinforce stability and trust, while keeping his other hand relaxed at his side. The second dog moved a step closer, closing the gap between them, and Caleb acknowledged the movement with a brief glance, ensuring both animals remained within safe and calm proximity. In the distance, the structure continued to settle quietly, no longer active in danger, but still unstable enough to require caution. Caleb's attention remained divided between the dogs and the surrounding environment, maintaining a balance of awareness and reassurance. The medic made a small observation, noting the condition of both animals, while Caleb responded with brief, controlled updates, keeping communication clear and minimal. The rescued dog gradually leaned more comfortably against Caleb's leg, signaling a shift from alert survival mode to calm presence, while the second dog stood quietly beside them, its posture easing as the immediate threat faded completely. The entire scene now reflected resolution rather than crisis, with every movement slower, steadier, and more intentional. Caleb exhaled slowly, finally allowing the weight of the operation to settle, as both German shepherds remained close, safe, and stable under the fading light of emergency response. The scene had fully transitioned from emergency response into quiet resolution as Caleb Morgan stood with both German shepherds under steady supervision from the arriving field team, the environment now calm enough that every movement felt measured and deliberate rather than urgent. The damaged structure behind the secured perimeter remained unstable but inactive, with no further signs of collapse, allowing responders to shift focus from containment to assessment. Caleb remained close to the two dogs, maintaining a stable and reassuring presence as both animals continued to show signs of recovery from the intense experience inside the burning structure. The rescued German shepherd stayed positioned near Caleb's side, occasionally pressing gently against his leg as if confirming safety through physical proximity, while the second dog remained slightly offset but visibly relaxed, its posture no longer tense or defensive. The medic who had arrived earlier completed a brief visual evaluation and confirmed both animals were stable enough for transport to a veterinary unit for further care and monitoring. Caleb nodded in acknowledgement, his attention still divided between professional coordination and the immediate emotional state of the animals. A transport unit arrived shortly after, moving slowly into position with controlled precision, and Caleb guided both dogs calmly toward the designated vehicle area. The movement was unhurried, with no resistance from either animal, as if they now fully trusted the environment and the people within it. The rescued German shepherd walked beside Caleb with steady steps, occasionally glancing up at him before returning its focus forward, while the second dog followed closely behind, maintaining a consistent and composed pace. Caleb kept one hand lightly near the first dog's shoulder throughout the movement, ensuring continued reassurance without restricting freedom of motion. As they reached the transport area, the dogs were gently assisted into a secure, climate-controlled vehicle designed for animal care, where they settled quickly without signs of distress. Caleb paused at the edge of the vehicle, watching as both German shepherds adjusted to the calmer environment inside, their breathing steady and their posture relaxed compared to earlier conditions. The field team confirmed that the structure had been fully secured and that no further hazards were present, allowing full clearance of the area. Caleb remained in place for a moment longer, observing the dogs through the open side of the transport unit, noting how quickly they had transitioned from survival response to calm awareness. The rescued dog rested its head briefly against the interior padding, while the second dog sat upright, but composed, both now visibly stable under professional care. Caleb finally stepped back, giving a subtle acknowledgement to the responders before turning slightly toward the secured perimeter, where the last remnants of emergency activity were fading. The night air felt quieter now, carrying only distant vehicle sounds and the low hum of coordinated recovery operations. As Caleb stood there, the intensity of the moment began to settle into reflection rather than urgency. With both German shepherds safe, stable, and no longer in immediate danger, marking the quiet completion of a mission defined not by chaos, but by precision, trust, and steady presence.